think about dying?
Hey sis, welcome to the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Wagner, and while I'm tough as a mother, sometimes I know we're all out here, tired of needing to be one. Buckle up as we land the mothership and all things motherhood in the real world. Before we move on, I'd like to thank the incredible sponsors who saw an opportunity to support women in their day-to-day journeys by joining together to make this podcast a reality. Thank you, Precision Chiropractic, Jennifer Pansition with Edward Jones, Dutch Maids, the Avalon Foundation, and Chica Creative for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families in the real world. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice. So one of the misperceptions I believe that's out there with homeschool is that the kids are by themselves all the time. And so I know one of the, we'll call it again, the 80s mindset for homeschool versus where we are today. Can you talk a little bit about like the co-ops or the social connections or clubs that are out there now compared to what used to be available?
Yeah, so when we were coming up, we had, one or two co-ops that were available, and we participated in them. It actually created one co-op that I'm still a part of now. But you're right. It back in the day, people felt like people who homeschool were odd or strange because they didn't have social skills. And now I actually feel sorry for parents that are homeschooling now, because the problem back then is we didn't have enough. The problem now is there are too many. And it's like, how do I choose? So there are all kinds of, in your neighborhoods, there are co-ops, and a lot of churches will host these groups that come in once or twice a week. There are online options. There are schools, there are Christian schools that actually allow homeschoolers to come in and participate in sports or in certain classes. There is so much that's available, not to mention what's available online. There are parents who will literally create their own little thing. They might be friends with Julie, and she wants to homeschool, and we have kids the same age. And so one mom says, well, I really love, histories. I'll do that. And another mom says, well, I'll do science for our kids. And I've done that before, where we swap back and forth. So there are so many ways to get it done. And one of the things that people are really surprised at is when my kids say that I was homeschooled, and they're like, but you're so normal. And it's like, yeah, because it's not abnormal anymore. It's homeschool.
It's not abnormal at all. I think something else to keep in mind as well, my daughter, again, going through some health type issues, once we got her healthy, there was what we call TFT, trauma from treatment, right? Blood work and just, too many doctors for so long trying to find answers. And so what was really beautiful as well with her journey, and this is, again, I think people also take homeschool that maybe you're going to have to do it K through 12 like you did. And, that's not true either. Like, we just did it for half a year because that's what was needed for us. And I was still willing to do it again in the fall, but my daughter, again, with how she grew up and just, some of her issues when she was younger, she didn't get that socialization that a lot of kids get with signing up for soccer or gymnastics. And so her decision was, after, getting healthy, that she wanted to go back to school. Now, again, she's in a Montessori type environment, so that's a bit different from a traditional school system as well. And I think that's why it works well for her. But I also, sitting here with you, Anita, I want to make sure parents understand, like, look, if you want to try this and you hate it and it sucks, like, you get to go back, or you can try another school or figure out something that's going to work. Right. But I think, some of the issue that we're currently running into with these children is, unfortunately, some of them are sick and they have underlying issues, and those need to be addressed. And homeschool is a really beautiful option to get their health in check. I think maybe another sliver of that is there are kids that are potentially in educational settings that aren't right for the type of, brain that consists of different, whether it be neurodivergent or learning disabilities that maybe they're just not set up in the right academic setting. Or, there are some kids that this individualized and independent approach is also going to be the right fit for them at home. But again, that mindset, like I'm going to come back to that again because it's bubbling up in this moment, that we just don't have to pretend that if you're going to try it, that you got to keep doing it if it's not working.
That's
Or maybe you're going to do it 1 year, you're going to do it 3, you're going to do it K through 12. But like, yeah, no, there's no parameters on that either, right?
Yeah, well, remember I said at the beginning, it was like every year we went back and looked, are we going to do it again?
Yeah.
It just wasn't like when I started, oh yeah, I'm going to do this K through 12. No, not at all. And I am an administrator for a homeschool program, and we currently have close to 100 children that are in that program. And there is every possible combination that you can think of. From one student is, and there are 4 kids in their family, one's homeschooled, the others are not. From someone coming out of the system, the traditional system for a while, doing homeschool for a year or two, especially athletes, because they want to prep for scholarship, and those playing for Division 1, and then they'll go back to to another school setting when their academics are strengthened so that they can do well. So there are so many options for how you homeschool. It goes kind of back to what I think I said, at the beginning, is each family is totally unique. And so the worst thing you can do is look at someone else and think that that's the way you homeschool. No, you have to look at the resources that are available in your family, what your dynamics are, and then you make that decision.
Hey friends, not feeling like the best version of yourself lately? I get it. That's why my family and I go see Dr. Taylor at Precision Spinal Care. Whether it's you or one of your kiddos, Precision Spinal Care in Perrysburg, Ohio can help you crack the code to better health. Call 419-873-7223 or visit chiropractorperrysburg.com to learn more. Let's talk a little bit about hybrid options. So I'm noticing, and maybe you are too, that specifically in private schools, right, that some of them are even more open to the possibility of a hybrid model. So if that's also something that parents are, wondering, can they or could they look into, it's certainly a conversation to be had, not again just with private school, but potentially public as well. But are you seeing that? Because I know our school, when Liv was going through what she did, they were fantastic about working with us and still being like, hey, she can come for extracurriculars, or if she wanted to come for music or art, like she's of course welcome back here. So are you seeing any setups that are like that as well?
I am, and especially for children who have illnesses and those kinds of things, I'm seeing more traditional schools offer. They actually call it homeschool, that is sponsored by the traditional school to help students who are having health challenges. So that might be something that you'd want to check into with your school to see if that's an option, or maybe if they'd be willing to start that and use your child as the kind of the kickoff to it.
I think knowing that 30% of kids in the United States are currently school avoidant, that more schools, if they're not currently thinking about this, need to. Because again, we know that 1 in 2 children currently has a chronic condition. Childhood epidemics are on the rise. And again, so many of them are sick, and we're looking at them like these are mental health challenges, and they're having mental health symptoms that look like mental health challenges. But again, a lot of these kids have underlying health complications that are causing so much neuroinflammation or autoimmune type issues that I think more and more schools are going to need to offer these type of hybrid models. And, I just think for the type of kids that we're dealing with nowadays, it's probably always been needed, right? I think back to some friends I knew or some family members that I had that, traditional school has never been the right fit for kids. But I love sometimes how, right, like innovation is birthed out of these moments of adversity. And so I'm hopeful that through this as well, that this is kind of the kick that we needed to get the traditional education system moving in the right direction anyways.
So true. The pandemic really just opened up so many possibilities, and it's just accelerating the number of ways to educate a child. And I think it's going to even go beyond, like you said, traditional homeschool. I think it's already bled into, I don't even think there's names for all the different kinds of educational environments that I'm looking at. And I think homeschool is just going to become one of them. But I agree, it's definitely moving away from that traditional setting, and it'd be very wise for them to see the handwriting on the wall and start offering more options.
So you have a fantastic website that I checked out, and as we're talking and as parents are even like, okay, you know what? This was either on my radar a little bit or it's been on my radar a lot. I wanted to look into this. What do parents do, or what would some of your recommendations be that if their interest is piqued by this, what's next?
So, if you're interested, the first thing I would recommend is that you go and visit a website site called HSLDA. I think it's .org. It's Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They have a page there that you click your state, and it will tell you what the rules are for your state. Because in the United States, there are so many different rules for homeschool. Some places are very strict, like New York. Some places out west are much more laid back. There's no reporting at all. And then the next thing I would do is connect with someone, a consultant, a mentor, a Facebook group that could begin to give you just where to start. And what are the beginnings or what are the basics? Because the one thing I have noticed with most parents who are thinking about homeschool is when they begin to research, they are overwhelmed because there's just too much information out there. So you want to connect with somebody who kind of has your same educational philosophy. Like I'm a butterfly. So hands-on field trips, projects. But then you might not like that. You may want something that's a little more structured. So then you want to connect with a mentor or consultant who does things in a maybe a little more structured way. Neither is wrong. It's just they're individual. And you have to kind of recognize your educational philosophy as you're going out to look for help so that you align with other people that think like you think.
Yeah,
I know.
it's very helpful. Again, can you repeat that website one more time?
Sure. HSLDA.org.
And we will also put that in the show notes. And then I also noticed on your website, right, just a couple of free resources or some, different tips or tricks that are on there. And so again, we will get folks that before we sign off with you today. But I loved going to your website and also just, seeing some information there that could be useful for individuals. I know for me, I did a ton of homework. I just started with, right, my friend who was the homeschool mom who told me to just calm down and chill out. But every time I talked to someone else, I would ask for a name. So then I asked my friend Lauren for a name, and then she gave me a name, and then I would call that person and they gave me a name. I would say in general, I probably talked to about 10 different individuals. And that was really helpful because I got to hear out of the gate. And I think that is what allowed me to chill out a little bit was I heard how different all of them were doing this. And so it did allow me the flexibility to at least step into it, to be like, okay, I don't have to have all of this figured out. And I think month one went very different from month two, the way we did homeschool. And then month three looked very different from, month two. So it's just a journey. It's like anything else, like starting a new job or going back to school, getting married, right? Like you don't have all of this figured out of the gate. Like it's one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. You keep what you like, you throw out what you hate, and you rebuild from there.
That's right. Because we all love our children. And at the end of the day, we will do whatever is needed for them to be okay. And if that's homeschool, you might go kicking and screaming. You might go confused and wondering and fearful, but you go because you know that you're trying to find the best solution for your child. And what do we know all of before we jump into it? I don't think there's anything that's like that. And homeschool won't be like that either, but you can do it.
You can, I heard that a lot from friends or acquaintances that when it kind of got out there publicly that my daughter had come home from homeschool, the number
Mhm.
one thing I heard was, I could never do that. And I didn't, I would have said the same thing. I
Exactly.
would have absolutely said the same thing, but I was put into a position where, I had a choice, but I knew that the other way was absolutely not the right choice. And I knew I was going to figure it out. Sometimes God has a tricky way, but when never say never, because I said I would never be able to do it either. And I think now I'm so grateful for having had the opportunity. I don't know if we
Yes.
would do it again or not. I'm open to
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am I'm so moved by how we were able to do it and how helpful it was for our daughter during a time she needed it. But never say never, right? And again, we have so many different
Never.
approaches at this point to really design and build this a way that's going to work for each and every family. When we talked on the phone, I believe it was last week, you had said something around values. And so again, if families are kind of on the fence or even wondering if this is something they can or could explore, can you kind of walk through that values conversation and how that might help more moms and dads just really, if they're interested in this path, go down it and why it could be so important?
Sure. Kind of what you said about, think people saying, I could never do that is mainly because you haven't been put in a position where you have to consider it. And when you are considering it, recognizing that you have an opportunity to be able to instill into your children um, the values that are important to you, that you have this opportunity, however long it is, 6 months, a year, 3 years, you have this opportunity to connect with them in a way that they can better understand why you believe what you believe, and they get to watch you. And this is a part of the you growing because it's very painful. Sometimes we think we're one thing or one way, and having that child in our environment on a daily basis, it uncovers for us even some areas that we're like, "Ooh, I didn't know I was like that." And they are honest enough to let you know those things, but you grow from it. And you know, at the end of the day, one regret you will never have is that I thought I should have homeschooled, but I didn't. Because with that regret will always come in the back of your mind. Would my daughter have turned out? Would this be different? Would her health be different? Would who she is be different? But you did this thing that maybe it felt like impossible to do, but now you're moving forward. She's gone back, but you took the time to take the chance that this could make a difference. And that's a value as well, because that is took it took faith
Yeah.
to step out and try, and to know that even if it didn't work out, that God had you, and He was going to show you what the next step was.
Let's give people somewhat of a checklist. I'm a big picture kind of girl, right? So for those different learning styles that are with us today, we've kind of talked through some things. We've thrown out kind of your first steps, but first and foremost, uh, maybe mindset would be number one, right? Like, where are you in this?
Absolutely.
What are your values? How could this be advantageous? Number two, maybe check out the website, right? And you said it was the homeschool legal. And again, we mentioned it and we'll put it in the show
Yeah.
notes, but
Hmm.
that shows you your specific state and what the requirements are. The next thing, right? If you get onto those requirements, understanding the different groups or support avenues that are out there to maybe find those 10 people like I did, right? Who is somebody and a
Yes.
friend of a friend that at least knows someone, and you just keep asking questions, you keep doing the research and getting some
Yes.
ideas from those individuals. And then maybe from
Hmm.
there, right? Like the questions I asked when I talked to them was, tell me about how you've done homeschool. Tell me about your day. What's your week look like? How are you guys doing it? And then after that, what am I on 4? That would really be around, what is your curriculum? How would you want to do that? What would number 5 be? Maybe your, plan for a week. What does that look like? But
Exactly.
man,
Mhm.
it's not as complicated as we make it. And again, going
Wow.
through this process opened my eyes in a lot of different areas. I mean, I used to own a restaurant and I had never owned one before. And we go through a pandemic and it was like baptism by fire. And I came out of that and I'm like, no, literally, you could do anything. And I felt that way with homeschool being thrown into it. I'm like, I'm not a teacher. I don't hold these skill sets. My patience is nowhere near at a level where I can do this for my child. And I pleasantly surprised myself. And again, don't get me wrong,
Yes.
there were a few really hard days in there, but a
Absolutely.
theme you'll hear throughout my podcast, and it's one of my favorite quotes, is if it feels hard, it is. And that is a point of permission to lean into to figure out what is not working so that you
Yes.
can improve upon it. And so my
That's
style
right.
was wrong in some at one of those points. Her health was me leaning in a little too hard because it had already been a month and I didn't think we were where we needed to be. And again, it was just letting go of all these expectations. But hopefully that could be a checklist of, right? Like, hey, go to that, get your mindset and your family and your values and a conversation potentially with, your spouse or your child's other parent if you're in dual households and figure that out. But then, yeah, going to the website and seeing what the compliance is for each of those. But then again, talking to people, thinking about a curriculum, thinking about a schedule. What other items would you add to that? Or did I miss anything?
Have fun.
Woo woo.
Have fun. Go on field trips. Do projects. Sign them up for art class.
Mhm.
Just homeschooling can be so fun.
Yeah.
And even if your child is has a health challenge, how can you bring the fun home? How can you make it so it's not just sitting at the table,
Yeah.
feel doing my math? Be intentional about making this something that they wake up in the morning and eventually are like, "Ooh, what we doing today?"
Yeah. Also with my daughter's health and significant years beyond, that even that we, just started when she was very young, but definitely around 4. So it was 9 when she needed to go to the homeschool. But I'll never forget the day that I was sitting there with her and we were just watching a documentary and we were cuddling on the couch. And I knew just how healing this was on multiple levels.
Yeah.
It was just really beautiful that, yes, it's her educational experience, but there were multiple things
Yes.
happening outside of just her education. Like it gave us an opportunity to not only heal her body, but heal some connection and some wounds there that through all of this that mom and daughter needed to also work on. And, it's not something that's often talked about, but it was a really beautiful moment as well.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That's awesome and so true.
Mhm. So, what have we not talked about that would be important before we wrap up our time together today?
What haven't we talked about? Take care of mom.
Oh,
Take care
yeah.
of dad.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? That's really great
Don't
advice.
don't get lost. Don't get lost in the trying to get this all done and forget about yourself because you were the key to the whole thing. And so you have to have margin. I was talking about earlier about margin in my brain to hear my daughter talk to me and be totally focused in on her. You have to have margin in your life to have time for you. And that means you have to be willing to put it down sometimes and go out and hang out and hire a babysitter, get grandma over, whatever you have to do to
Mhm.
get some time for you. It is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And that's how you make it for the long haul.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know either that if they have a diagnosis that either their insurance or through other support groups out there that there is respite care that is available. And so I offer that up to families listening as well, whether they're dealing with autism or PANS or PANDAS or ADHD. But it's a newer option that's out there and available for some parents. And, again, sometimes even just having once a month, right, can go such a long way. And, your family can't help you, your friends can't help you if you don't ask for help. And I think at times it's difficult because with these childhood epidemics, right, sometimes they're not well understood at this point, but that doesn't mean that it's not needing to explain and getting them to understand. It's about getting your need met. And there's a difference there. And so making sure that mamas or dads that that it's just about them, at least your family or friends, meeting you where you're at and at least being able to get your need met. The understanding will come, but to your point, yes, taking care of mom and dad, and that's such beautiful advice. So thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's tell people how they can get a hold of you. What's your website?
So my website is Anita at AnitaGibson.com. You can also, I also am the president of a nonprofit called National Homeschool Advocacy, and that's NHAonline.org. And it's a place where we have resources and experts on different things. We offer curriculum options, just some place where people can go to one place because there's so much out there now and get the basics of what they need.
Absolutely. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed your website. I absolutely enjoyed our conversation today. I hope it gives parents at least an inkling into a side of homeschool that maybe they were not aware of before, but you have been a gem. Thank you for your wisdom and your expertise, and certainly for joining us today. Listeners certainly now have your website that they can go and check out your information and how to best set up their homeschool journey should they be interested. But you were also so generous to offer up 2 coaching sessions, 2 30-minute coaching sessions. So I want to tell our listeners to definitely jam with us the next 2 weeks over social media. And we're going to run a contest where maybe a few of those individuals can get access to some individualized coaching with you on their homeschool journey should they choose to want to get started. So anything else before we go? But I know I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure being here. And I would be more than happy to assist parents, with getting a plan together, just giving them next steps. So where do I go from here? I'm just, I'm blown away by what you're doing. And I'm just praying that doors would open and resources would come so that you can do this more because you are so needed in our world.
Oh, Anita, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it really goes down to Starfinder, right? And the book that you wrote. And if anybody is also interested in picking that up to just really find out the uniqueness of not only our children, but I think as adults, so many of us have just went down this one path, right? And I'm not sure I would have chose the hardship that has come with this journey. I don't know that I would have chose it, but now going through it and having learned what I have, I would go back and do it again because I just think we're all out here. And if we could all just harness our part of the world that we could help improve and change, what a better world it would be. So thank you for doing your part. Thank you for honoring my part. And I know that together we're going to get this done. So thank you so much, Anita. It was a pleasure having you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Join me next week as my dear friend Jennifer Panzician, a financial advisor with Edward Jones, walks us through why you need to give a shift in your perspective about your finances. Women typically live longer than men, so their retirement income needs to last longer. See you next week as we discuss all things health and wealth. Thank you, Precision Chiropractic, Jennifer Panzician with Edward Jones, Dutch Maids, the Avalon Foundation, and Chica Creative for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families in the real world. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice.